Is America still a reliable ally to us?
Oh, well, with Donald Trump, you can't rely on anything.
The one issue where arguably Donald Trump is having real problems is Jeffrey Epstein.
That was his best friend for more than a decade. And so people trusted him that he knew what he was talking about when he said there was an entire universe of people of wealth and power who were part of this child sex ring.
Congressman, what do you make of the situation? The pictures of starving children in Gaza.
It seems to have long since been clear that Israel's efforts under Benjamin Netanyahu are not to get the hostages out.
The News Agents USA.
It's Jon. Now, Jamie Raskin is one of the foremost Democrat lawmakers. He led the prosecution, the impeachment, if you like, of Donald Trump after the events of January the 6th, a position that was appointed to him by Nancy Pelosi. And it earned a permanent enmity with Donald Trump. Trump recently called Raskin ugly and a dope and a loser in block capitals, to which Raskin replied, "I suppose I don't like being called ugly by Donald Trump, but not everyone can live up to his exquisite levels of handsomeness and personal physical grace." Raskin also didn't endear himself that much to Joe Biden when he became one of the first Democratic lawmakers to write to him and say maybe it was time to get out of the presidential race. He's the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee and represents Maryland's 8th congressional district and is in London looking at the crisis in free speech. Congressman Raskin, thank you very much for being with us and welcome to the News Agents. Let me start with that crisis in free speech, because I've just heard the speech you've delivered where you lacerated the Vice President J.D. Vance for the things he said, that the real crisis in free speech was not Russia or China, it was Europe. Is America still a reliable ally to us?
I think the American people are, yeah.
This administration?
No, I think we have a problem with this administration. I think that they are really caught up with the autocrats and the dictators and the bullies of the world. And that's why I wanted to, on this trip where we're supposed to be investigating the European Union's attack on the free speech rights of the right wing in Europe, I wanted to turn the tables and say, in fact, it's Donald Trump who's attacking with state power free speech rights in America of law firms and universities and protesters and you name it. In fact, the American people are on the side of free speech and are on the side of democracy, and I want to keep our true democratic alliance alive.
Yeah, so in answer to the question, is America a reliable ally with Donald Trump at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the answer is no.
Oh, well, with Donald Trump, you can't rely on anything. I mean, one day your tariffs are going to be 40%, then they're going to be 30%, and there's going to be no tariffs, and there's going to be 15%. I mean, even his one major ideological commitment, which is to mass deportation of people who are undocumented in the country, a couple of weeks ago, he said, well, that's not really going to apply to people on the farms because we need them, and they're such good workers, and people in restaurants. Then he backed off on that when one of his aides got to him on it. And so, yeah, there's no enduring policy commitments there. It's chaotic. So yes, it's not reliable. Nobody can really rely on it. But what I want to tell you is you can rely on the people of America. We're going to get back on track in terms of our commitment to freedom and democracy and social progress and our transatlantic relationships.
But Congressman, we heard that 4 years ago from Joe Biden.
Yeah.
We heard that from Joe Biden when he came to Cornwall at the G7 summit and said, America is back. Don't worry. That was an aberration, what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Joe Biden was the aberration and what Trump represents is the new normal where he's still popular. He won a presidential election last November. The Democrats seem to be nowhere.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not clairvoyant. I don't know, but I will tell you that there are a lot of us in America who are determined to see that our country remain a true democratic force in the world for freedom, for human rights, for free markets among the people of the world. And we don't like what Donald Trump has stood for, and we don't think it's going to last. I mean, his popularity has been sagging over the trade war he's announced against the whole world, over this Doge experiment. Even Elon Musk has run out of town and is no longer part of it. It's tremendously unpopular. And even all of the mass deportations and the raids that they're doing have become unpopular in Trump country, in red states, where it's really dislocating people's way of life.
And yet the one issue, and you've just listed a litany of things where you think he's doing badly, the one issue where arguably Donald Trump is having real problems is Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
A guy who died, 6-7 years ago.
Yes.
Is it serious, what the situation?
Well, look, in the new age of social media that we inhabit, and of course the social media are more important to how people get news, certainly younger people, than the traditional media. What matters is what people are able to communicate on the internet. And what he's been able to communicate is that he wanted the Jeffrey Epstein files to be released. And he knew Jeffrey Epstein. That was his best friend for more than a decade. And so people trusted him that he knew what he was talking about when he said there was an entire universe of people of wealth and power who were part of this child sex ring. So people believed him. Then he got into office. They got to see the files. He had more than 1,000 FBI agents working around the clock, 24-hour shifts. The FBI was looking for any mentions of Donald Trump, any pictures of Donald Trump, any video of Donald Trump. And after that happened, he said they were not going to be releasing the Epstein files. So who's upset about that? Well, obviously the Democrats, because the Democrats are saying, wait a second, you've been running against the Democrats saying that there's a huge child sex conspiracy and feeding that to people. Go ahead and release it. But also the Republicans, because the Republicans got aboard that bandwagon and said, we're going to release the Epstein tapes. And now suddenly he won't do it. So, you're right that there are other policy issues that might have come first. For example, the fact that he's thrown 17 million people off of their Medicaid health coverage. That's what we've been fighting over for the last several months, but they did it. That did not cause the kind of explosion on the Republican side that the Epstein files has.
Surely if there was stuff, and I saw the speech you made on the floor of the House the other week saying you've got to release all the files and what are the Republicans doing trying to cover this up? If there was anything that was compromising of Donald Trump in those files, and let's face it, the files were compiled during the Biden years, surely they would have come out by now. You would have.
Why do you assume that?
Because presumably there would have been ways and means of people in the Biden administration, in the Justice Department, of leaking information that would have been damaging to Donald Trump when you're facing him in the presidential election.
I want to make 2 points about that. Number one is Donald Trump has taken the Department of Justice in a radically different direction from what it has been throughout its entire history, going back to the 19th century. It really has been an independent law enforcement branch where there's been a wall of separation between politics and prosecutorial decisions. Trump is the one who has said, I'm going to take this over. It's his attorney general who has said, we are going to report to Donald Trump, and they're running it like his personal law firm. So when people say, why didn't Biden just release it? Biden didn't run the Department of Justice. There was an attorney general there. If you want to ask the question, why didn't Attorney General Merrick Garland do it? There are a lot of Democrats asking the question, why didn't Merrick Garland bring various prosecutions earlier in the administration than he did? In any event, you'd have to ask him to know why. But nobody was making a big deal out of it except Donald Trump. And that was later. Remember that it was under the Biden administration that Ghislaine Maxwell was being prosecuted. So there was action happening there. She was prosecuted and convicted and sent to jail for 20 years.
Look, we are sitting here in London. I've tried to imagine the circumstances where our equivalent of the Deputy Attorney General, the Justice Secretary or the Minister of State for Justice, would go to a prison to speak to someone who has been convicted for 20 years. And I'm finding I struggle to imagine it. What is going on there?
It's utterly baffling. The president, she is going to come Congress to testify if she testifies. And there's a strong demand to see her come and testify. Her credibility is quite near zero because she's seeking a pardon and clemency from President Trump. That's her only practical way of getting out of prison. And so her testimony is likely to be written in all caps and bold letters with lots of exclamation points because Donald Trump will presumably get her to say whatever he wants. Now, the idea that the Department of Justice would lend itself to this scheme just demonstrates how much they are operating under Donald Trump's thumb, right? It is a completely baffling and bizarre thing. What exactly is he there to discuss? Well, presumably he's there to discuss what would the content of her testimony be and how pleasing would that be to the president who controls the power to pardon her. And he's already proven multiple times, literally thousands of times almost, that he's willing to use the pardon power to reward his political friends or those who do his will.
So let's just say you're right. Let's say the theory is that, Ghislaine Maxwell says, yeah, Donald Trump never came to the island, but there were a whole pile of Democratic senators and prominent Democrats who did. Donald Trump is squeaky clean. There's nothing to see here.
Yeah.
How easy is that to sell, given that you are going to then release the only person who was convicted of the monstrous activities that QAnon has fantasized about, this paedophile ring? There was a paedophile ring at that island of Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, Donald Trump just released from prison 1,600 people who participated in an insurrectionary riot against our government, including those who violently assaulted more than 140 of our police officers, disabling many of them, disfiguring many of them. And he had no problem pardoning them because they had been playing on his team. And he basically pardoned a future private militia for whatever he wants to do. So do I think he would have any compunction about pardoning Maxwell if she were to get up and say, well, the one person who tried to get Jeffrey Epstein to stop all of this child sexual abuse was Donald Trump, who really urged him not to do it. He didn't call the police. It's true. He didn't report it to the authorities, but he really told him it was a bad idea. Maybe she comes forward to say that. Does anybody think it's worth anything? No. So in Congress, the Department of Justice should release the files, and then we can take her testimony into account with everything else we're able to get and whatever other witnesses come forward.
Do you think they will?
I think they're going to have to because there are lots of Republicans who are honest people who think that Donald Trump really meant it when he said he was going to release the files and that there was this extraordinary conspiracy of silence to suppress the truth about the full dimensions of this child sex abuse ring. Remember, there was a guy who showed up at a restaurant in Washington, D.C., Comet Pizza, I think with an AR-15, certainly some kind of rifle.
Connecticut Avenue.
On Connecticut Avenue. Because he believed all of this stuff. So there are not thousands or hundreds of thousands, but millions of people who believe Donald Trump when he said it. And they are getting very angry about the fact that Donald Trump has changed his tune because his name now appears throughout the Epstein files.
So is this going to be like Al Capone, where it's not the crimes, it's the tax thing that gets him? I mean, is it going to be something like Epstein, where the breach happens with his base, which has seemed so solid until now?
Well, first of all, Donald Trump has been impeached twice, once for the Ukraine shakedown, once for inciting violent
the American
insurrection.
people took a view on that and said, we still want him as our president.
That's true. He's also been held accountable in civil court in New York, where a unanimous jury found that he found him guilty on civil grounds of sexual abuse. Yes. And so there have been certain kinds of accountability that begin to give people a better sense of who this guy is. You may be right that maybe it comes down to this. I don't want to discount the significance of what the Epstein files show. There were real and are real victims of what Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell did. And the girls who were as young as 14 years old are now women who have come forward to talk about the horrors inflicted on them, their families, and their lives by what they did. And on the Democratic side, anyway, we view institutionalized child sex abuse and the abuse of power and connections as a serious crisis in our society. it's not just the Epstein. I mean, we had the whole crisis with massive child sex abuse in the Catholic Church. We've seen scandals at universities like Michigan State and Ohio State, rapes and sexual assaults, not just against girls, but boys, young men, as well as young women. This is something that we've got to deal with. But meantime, the Trump administration is deleting funding for all the anti-human trafficking efforts that we've got going across the U.S. government, at the State Department, the Department of Justice, Health and Human Services. They're just shutting the anti-human trafficking programs down. So there's a broader significance to the discussion over the Epstein files.
You're here in London. You're talking about the crisis in free speech. You're also talking about the relationship, and your speech this evening was talking about the importance of the relationship between Europe and the US, and that they need to stand together. Over the issue of Palestine and what happens in Gaza, it looks like the US is going in one direction and Europe is going in another. Congressman, what do you make of the situation, the pictures of starving children in Gaza, and what should be the policy in terms of recognizing Palestine?
Well, it's absolutely gruesome and grim and unacceptable. And there are children starving. There are adults who are being shot down while they're waiting to go and get food. And that is the immediate emergency, which I think is unifying the world in demanding immediate shipments of food aid and medical assistance into Gaza. But it is opening up this broader conversation about where this war is going, because it seems to have long since been clear that Israel's efforts under Benjamin Netanyahu are not to get the hostages out. And certainly the hostage families do not feel that that is the paramount goal in any way. But instead you have Smotrich and Ben-Gvir who've been exercising a lot of decisive influence over where that's going. So look, the first thing is people are starving right now, people are in danger right now, and the world has got to unify to de-escalate the situation and get food aid in. And then let us hope that that leads very quickly to a ceasefire where we can address what the future is going to be, so that the Israel can live in security, the Palestinians can live in security, we can remove terrorist operators in Hamas, the ones that are left, and that there is a future of decency and prosperity and human rights and democracy for Israelis and Palestinians alike.
But you'll know that President Macron has said that at the UN General Assembly in September, France is going to recognise Palestine as a country. The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said something very similar, although with a couple of conditions attached to it, that he too. Do you think America should recognise Palestine?
Well, you know, we know that's not going to happen under President Trump. And I read what President Macron is doing and what Starmer is doing, is saying this status quo cannot last, where 35 or 40 or 50 people are dying every day, including lots of children. The world will not abide that. That situation has got to change. And so if that's the shock that's needed, they are saying that is the shock that is needed, that they are willing to just go ahead and recognize a Palestinian state if nothing else is going to change in the meantime.
So they're right to do it?
Well, look, the world needs to respond to this situation. That's not the only way to respond. I mean, those of us in Congress are demanding that there be immediate food shipment and opening of the borders so food can get in to save people. So I understand everybody is rightfully frustrated with the situation and people are speaking out about it. And, you know, that to me is a sign of life, of a global alliance for democracy and human rights. And we should be able to come through this crisis with Israel having strategic security at its borders, which is inviolable. The hostages that are left have got to be released by Hamas. Hamas should be sidelined and discarded as a force with the Palestinians, but there's got to be movement forward to create a two-state solution, or if the parties over there have another idea, they can put it on the table. And so that's why, you know, I don't know that we need to prejudge what the outcome is going to be, but the status quo is completely intolerable.
I mean, let's go back to where we started. You talked about the threat to democracy of Donald Trump and amassing power and all the rest of it. Do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are threats to Israeli democracy in the way that they are going about this.
Look, I think that the right-wing autocrats of the world are a terrible threat to their own societies, whether you're talking about Putin in Russia or Orban in Hungary or Xi in China or Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir in Israel, or, you can take the countries around the world. Bolsonaro has been a major threat in Brazil, you name it. This is going on all over the place. And one of the things that I'm here to talk about is that the autocrats, the dictators, and the bullies have found each other. They have a common enemy in strong liberal democracy. They're not interested in either global movements or domestic commitments to human rights for people. We have got to place human rights first, and human rights and democracy go together. The dictators and the kings and the queens and the emperors are never going to defend people's human rights. All that they care about is their own power and their own wealth. And, like in our country, in America, America's a great country. You can get rich in a lot of different ways. You should not be able to get rich by going into government and making deals with foreign dictators or collecting $400 million airplanes from autocratic governments around the world. That should not be your agenda. Your agenda should be the common good of the American people. And so that's what we mean by democratic government that's an instrument for uplifting everybody in society.
And one of the long-standing policies of the United States has been a two-state solution, which kind of everyone signs up to, or a lot of people sign up to. Benjamin Netanyahu notably doesn't. But isn't that as an idea dead? I mean, realistically, Israel after October the 7th, the Israeli people will not feel comfortable. Netanyahu knows that, is capitalizing on that. I mean, do you still think that it is possible to reinvigorate the idea of it?
Well, I mean, the nightmare terrorism of October 7th, which will live forever in infamy in the eyes of the world, took place without a two-state solution. You could view it as an episode in terrorism that took place where there wasn't a secure Palestinian state that could control terrorists and that could engage in diplomacy and mutual security pacts with the people of Israel and so on. And, there's been a lot of reportage in Israel about regret over Netanyahu's willingness to support Hamas through Qatar, through payments that were made to Qatar, precisely because Hamas and the Palestinian Authority would not get together. It was sort of a poor form of the divide and conquer strategy. So in any event, I understand that is the popular sentiment there. It's been American foreign policy for decades that we're committed to a two-state solution. Obviously, a lot of things complicate that up until this point. There's a lot of different solutions that people from right to left are putting on the table now about how to get out of it. But right now, we're facing a short-term crisis and emergency with children dying every single day and famine spreading throughout Gaza. That's just an unacceptable situation. And the great powers of the world and the great diplomats of the world need to get together to get through this crisis.
You are a prominent Jewish congressman. You are a supporter of Israel, although kind of a critical friend, if I could put it like that. How does Israel come back from this in the reputation of this country, which was once seen as kind of this lively, vibrant democracy, which was outward looking and all the rest of it? It's seen as a pariah state now, isn't it?
Well, look, there's a struggle for democracy and human rights, and there's a struggle for civilization in every single society on earth. And I would like to think, just speaking about my own country, about America, that we are defined not by the problems that we've had or the injustices that we've institutionalized, like slavery, which was in existence for, centuries before, if you include the time before we became a country, but it was in existence for a long time. I would like to think we are defined not by slavery or the dispossession of the Native American Indians. We've been defined by the actions we've taken against it: abolition, the Civil War, the people who put themselves on the line to end slavery, to build Reconstruction, to fight for the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But the way we do justice to those civilizing movements that have come before us is to try to keep making those ideals real at a time when there's constant democratic backsliding. So I would say, the people of Israel have so much to be proud of in terms of what they've created in their society and the progress that they've made. But as you're suggesting, we don't want Israel to become a pariah state. And they have got to get through this, and they cannot allow this famine to continue in Gaza, and they've got to put an end to this war, as lots of people in Israel are demanding right now, including a lot of former government officials.
I'm struck in this conversation we're having that your passionate defence of the values of liberal democracy, of free speech, rule of law, all those things. Is the Democratic Party, after last November, able to channel those concerns? Because it looks as a party to be utterly lost and bereft of ideas. And the only kind of interesting ideas that are coming from Bernie Sanders, AOC, the new guy who's got the nomination to become New York mayor. That's where the fertile thought seems to be, not from establishment Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's the case that on the progressive side of things, lots of the great ideas and advances have come from popular movements and outside agitation. And progressive movements fought for the minimum wage. Progressive movements fought for child labor laws. Progressive movements have fought for the great advances of our history. So I think you're probably right. You don't always look to elected politicians to be the ones who are germinating all of those ideas. On the other hand, even in our most recent Democratic administration, the Biden administration, we passed the $1.2 trillion public investment plan in the infrastructure, the roads, the highways, the ports, the airports, rail and trail and cyber security. The Democrats did that. We also dramatically reduced the cost of prescription drug prices in the country. So I had constituents who are spending $500 a month on insulin for their diabetes. We cut that down to $30 a month. Maybe it's not the sexiest thing in the world to talk about, but that's meaningful to people, that we are focused on the things that actually make life better and easier at a time of a lot of problems. So
let me put the question slightly differently. Would you say the Democrats are in fine fettle at the moment?
But you got to translate that to me.
Fine fettle. God, that's a good British word. Or is it a good state? The Democratic Party is buoyant and doing well.
We lost the election. Whenever you lose an election, you can go back and look. They said the same thing about the Republicans. The Republicans would never recover after losing an election, after losing to Obama back to back. They could never recover. There was a permanent democratic transformation in the country, and they wouldn't come back. So when you've lost an election, you always look like you're in a fine fettle, if I understand correctly. You always look like you're down and out. But we are fighting our way back. We just had the largest demonstrations in the history of the United States. We had 5 or 6 million people come out, organized not by the Democratic Party, but by indivisible and pro-democracy forces across the country, and that's all to the good. But when people say, well, what are the Democrats doing? We don't control the House or the Senate. Our job in the minority is to fight our way back into the majority so we can move forward on a progressive agenda in the country. And we've got magnificent things happening around the country in different states and localities, which, I could tell you about, or I can come back and tell you about another time. There's a lot of good stuff happening. I just think this rhetoric is a little shop worn. You lost an election and therefore you're down and out forever. That's not true. We're coming back. And in fact, we've been winning lots of elections around the country. We just won a Wisconsin Supreme Court judgeship where Elon Musk, tried to get involved in it. And we beat them, I think, by 8 or 10 points. It was huge. We've been winning lots of state legislative elections around the country. We're coming back for next year. And that's the work I'm involved in.
Of course. Look, and I understand that your system is very different from ours in Britain. We have a leader of the opposition, which is, an official place. And you do not have a leader of the opposition in America. But where is the leadership in the Democratic Party now? If I said to you, who's going to be the next Democratic nominee for president, you'd say, I've got no idea. I mean, there are times in the past, though, where you have been able to say, well, it's probably Hillary Clinton, or it's going to be Barack Obama, or it's going to be, Joe Biden.
I mean, who was it who said? I think it was Mark Twain, but I don't know. But Mark Twain said, look, I'm not a member of an organized party. I'm a Democrat, okay? That is, and this is always the problem with the parties on the left, right? I mean, the bad news is we're not an authoritarian, right-wing party. The good news is we're not an authoritarian right-wing party. They do operate with the manners of a religious cult. They all follow the leader, no matter how ridiculous or obscene or unconstitutional the program is. That's why this Epstein files thing is a big deal. But that's not what it's like on the Democratic side. We've got lots of views on a lot of different subjects. And so we are a very big tent, and we are the party of democracy and freedom. But it's sort of...
Do you think you need to go more, given that defeat last November, in the direction of AOC and Mamdani and Bernie Sanders?
The way I would put it is somewhat different from what you're saying, which is we've got to hear all of the voices in our party. We've got to take the best ideas from all the parts of the party. And that's basically my feeling about America too. But I want the liberals in the party to be the best liberals they can be. I want the progressives in the party to be the best progressives they can be. I want the conservatives to be the best conservatives they can be. Let us all put the best ideas for public policy, for America on the table. Let's put the best political ideas on the table. And, it's not my job to heckle the Democrats who I go out and to work with every day, whether I'm in North Carolina or California or Washington State, or, there are people building our party and building our legislative successes and building our policy experiments. So I know that is like a jaded language of the pundits in America, just to say, oh, the Democrats are so down and out. And I guarantee you, when we win back the Congress, when we win back the presidency, they'll be saying that about the Republicans, that they've been permanently repudiated for what they did with Donald Trump.
Can I just press the rewind button for 12 months when you wrote that letter to Joe Biden and said, I think you're a tired pitcher. Was that the kind
Well, I
of
said
baseball?
His arm was tired.
His arm was tired.
His arm was tired.
His arm was tired, right.
Yeah.
Do you wish you'd written that 6 months earlier?
Well, see, the fallacy in the claim that there was some massive Democratic conspiracy to keep Joe Biden in is the suggestion that people knew exactly where he was. And until that debate happened, I would say, certainly speaking for myself, I had no idea. I thought, of course, he's getting older, but when I saw him, he was speaking fine. He was sharp. He came to Congress in the State of the Union, and he parried.
Was very punchy, yeah.
He was very punchy. He parried all of the heckling from Marjorie Taylor Greene and the gang. So I never saw it, but again, I didn't hang out with him. I mean, we're not close personal friends or anything. I saw him probably 2 or 3 times in a large group setting where he was making a speech. But when I saw the debate, that was the moment when I said, okay, now I know something, and I'm going to write him a letter, which came out later. But the letter basically said, hey, there's no shame in this. Like, this is a team sport. We're all in this together. There's no shame in saying, my arm is tired, coach. I mean, I'm coming out, send in a new pitcher.
And just a final thought. So you're here talking about free speech in Europe. Is it right that yesterday you were shouted down by one Nigel Farage when you were talking about free speech and he called you pig-headed?
Yeah, well, he can call me whatever he wants. I don't care about that. He wouldn't let me finish my speech. He wouldn't let me talk. We had just listened to an hour presentation by right-wing politicians and think tank people about how the European Union is essentially crushing civil freedom and how your new Online Safety Act, which was adopted to make the internet safe for children and so on, is actually going to destroy the right of conservatives to speak. And so we wanted to give them another perspective on that. And one of the cases they kept talking about was a guy who regretted that he and his girlfriend had an abortion 20 years before, and he was protesting by praying near an abortion clinic, and there's a law, a buffer zone law. Well, And that they were saying that this means that, the UK is no longer on the side of free speech, which struck us as ridiculous because that buffer zone law exists in America. We've got a federal law on that and was upheld by a Supreme Court. So I was trying to explain that. And then and I also was talking about all of Donald Trump's attacks on free speech, the rights of law firms and the rights of universities and colleges, and he couldn't handle it. And 2 or 3 minutes into my talk, he began screaming that this wasn't about Donald Trump and he wasn't going to allow this. And then he said, you're a guest here. You're a guest in our country. You're not being a good guest. And I said, you know what? You're a host. You should act like a host. And then he, started saying I was the most pig-headed person he'd ever seen. And I said, you know what? This is why we had a revolution against people like you. So I think that pretty much ended the conversation, but they didn't want to let us speak.
What did you think? I mean, given that this is about free speech.
I didn't know much about Nigel Farage, but he clearly is somebody who identifies with the ultra-right parties of the world, like the French National Rally, Rassemblement Français, and the Alternative for Deutschland and his party here, the Reform UK. These people are in league with Donald Trump. They believe in free speech except for any speech that they don't agree with. Then they're not interested in free speech. They're interested in free speech right up until the point that your speech criticizes them. Then they want to shut you down. It's exactly what Trump is doing to the law firms in America. It's what he's doing to the colleges and the universities in America. It's what he's doing to the federal workers, tens of thousands of whom, have had to leave their jobs because of him, have been forced out. They're not interested in free speech. They're interested in free speech as a kind of political hobby horse for the campaign. And that's it. And once they get into power, they're like any other right-wing authoritarian party. They want to extinguish the speech that they disapprove of.
Congressman Raskin, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun, John.
It's been great. Thank you.
The News Agents USA.